Okay, are we on?
No.
Tell me
Now
when.
you're on.
Now we're on?
Yep.
All right. So we're doing another video, late night from Willowdale. Not really from Willowdale anymore, but we're still going to call it from late night from Willowdale because Willowdale's part of the city of Toronto. We're still in the city of Toronto. We're actually at St. Clair and Dufferin, but you know, what does it matter? We're still in the city of Toronto. And Willowdale's where I grew up, and Willowdale's where we started this at Yonge and Finch, or Willowdale and Bishop. So we'll still call it late night from Willowdale because I like that actually. So what do we talk about? Let's talk about domestically. The topic du jour is deficits. The Ontario government just released its budget, and they said they're going to eliminate the deficit in the next couple of years. They're still going to run a big deficit, $4 billion of some sort, but they will eliminate it in the next couple of years. Ontario is a problem because subnationally, Ontario has one of the biggest debts in the Western world, $300 billion, almost $300 billion. And when you, and Ontario has been as many industrial economies. Ontario is a country, okay? Let's not. Ontario is a country, 13 million people. It stretches from the Arctic Ocean to the Great Lakes, from the prairies to eastern Canada. It's a country. It's got 13 million people, and it has an industrial economy, it has an agricultural economy, it has a big resource economy, it has a big manufacturing economy, which is suffering. So this is the reason that Ontario has got a $300 billion debt, because as anyone knows, the manufacture, because of trade agreements, because of the way the world economy has worked, we've suffered in Ontario. And we have a $300 billion debt, which is huge. It's the largest subnational debt in the Western world. And subnational being a part of a bigger country, right? Subnational, a province, part of the federal government. But it's not that, because Ontario is a powerful place, and its economy, because of the low dollar, because manufacturing is sort of slowly coming back, it's manageable, but it's difficult. Ontario is an interesting case, and I'm going to move to the feds in a sense, but Ontario tried to do something interesting, and this is, where when Dalton McGuinty introduced the the Green Energy Act, and followed through by Premier Kathleen Wynne, it's not easy to move to a sort of a green sort of economy. It's very difficult. No jurisdiction, even Denmark, has done it. So McGuinty tried to do it, and it's kind of backfired, and energy prices and electricity prices have gone up. But they tried to do something unique, and we don't have coal-fired plants in Ontario anymore. And they have tried to go to a green economy, but it's very difficult. And there's been a lot of NIMBYism with windmills and solar power, particularly windmill farms. And now there's an issue up in Collingwood. And it's very difficult, but they tried. And it's been a kind of a disaster. And Ontario is sort of a poster child for when you try to move to a green economy, it's not that easy. It's just not. And it's hard to store green energy. It's hard to store biomass and solar and wind. And that's why I sort of agreed with, refurbishing the nukes in Pickering, or particularly in Darlington, and Bruce Power, because the nukes provide 50% of Ontario's power. Yeah, they're not a long-term solution. They're not green. They are not green energy. Obviously, there's a lot of radioactive waste, and it's stored on site. So, but there is no such thing as green energy. There is no energy is totally green. The classic example is in Quebec, where a lot of hypocrites are saying, "Oh, we can't have the Energy East pipeline go through Quebec because of environmental concerns." Yet, as we know, Quebec destroyed much of the ecosystems of the James Bay and Hudson Bay lowlands for the James Bay projects, the hydroelectric projects up there. And yeah, they say that's green energy. They destroy the ecosystem of basically the size of Western Europe in central Quebec. and they call that green energy. So come on, there's no such thing. Hydroelectric power is not green energy. And just look at central Quebec. So when people in Montreal say, "Oh, we don't want the pipelines from Alberta," that's hypocrisy par none. Especially from a city that, of course, flushes raw sewage in the St. Lawrence every once in a while. So there's no such thing as green energy. Everything has its, everything has its limits. I think wind power is pretty much green energy, and there are no health effects to wind power. The studies are clear. The people who think there are health effects are just nutty NIMBYists, not in my backyard types. And solar power is good, but solar power needs batteries. Obviously, you have batteries. Batteries are nasty, but they can be recycled. And so there's no such thing as green energy. Hydroelectric power is not green energy. It takes a toll on the environment. I have to admit, I think the greenest energy we have in Ontario still comes from Niagara Falls. Where we turn it off. We actually do turn off Niagara Falls. New York State and Ontario turn it off to siphon the water underneath. Under Niagara Falls, Ontario, and Niagara Falls, New York, all the water gets funneled upriver to you've all been there. A lot of you have been there to the big hydroelectric facilities upriver. But that's actually pretty green, other than turning off the water. Yeah, if you go to Niagara Falls on some nights, you won't see a lot of water coming off the falls. They try to keep enough for the tourists, but yeah, they siphon it off. And some nights they siphon off a lot of water. Anyways, that's about as green as energy you're going to get in Ontario, Niagara Falls. But yeah, I'm not going to ramble on about this, because I'm rambling, but going on about the debt. And Ontario has gone through a rough time. I'm glad they're increasing gas taxes and some taxes in the budget. Some of this has been mismanaged, but taxes are good. Taxes is what pays for a civilized society. And yeah, Ontario definitely needs to get its act in order. And I'm a big fan of what McGuinty started and Kathleen Wynne has continued with Green Energy Act and have not. But yeah, Ontario manufacturing is slowly coming back. So I'm rambling on about this, but deficits aren't necessarily a bad thing. And even Ontario, with its bit of its crisis, hey, we're still functioning. This province is still functioning, and it can handle its $300 billion debt. But that is an issue. And Ontario, I think the tax increases are good, and I think Ontario is moving in the right direction. Obviously, low oil prices and low dollar is helping Ontario, and we're moving forward in that. And I want to move to a more national example where we definitely can handle. Ontario is like Alberta, like we're suffering, okay? But let's move to a more national example where the Canadian government definitely can handle a big debt. I said, okay, we're going for an 18 billion, they're saying, oh, we're going to have an $18 billion deficit federally. Big deal. Big deal. Canada's debt to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the OECD. We can handle an $18 billion. We can handle a $40 billion debt nationally. So, our debt to GDP is one of the lowest in the Western world or in the industrialized economies, according to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. So we can handle it. The United States is 70%. Ours is 31%. The United States is 70%. Japan's is over 100%. So Canada can easily handle a debt to GDP ratio. And we can easily, at 31%, we can handle an $18 billion deficit. We could probably handle a $40 billion deficit. This, in some quarters, they're all worried, oh my God, this is going crazy. No, this is not Greece. This is, we're not in any sort of crisis here. Canada's a wealthy country. Despite the low commodity prices, oil prices, Canada can handle it. Where our economy is diverse enough, and we can handle it, and we're wealthy enough and we can handle it. So yeah, I would say to Trudeau, go to $40 billion in deficit. Let's put the money into infrastructure spending. You know, what happened in Northern Ontario, the Nipigon Bridge, which is finally reopened a couple of days ago. Our only land, can you believe it? We only had one bridge that linked Eastern and Western Canada. Like, that's disgusting. So finally it reopened partially, obviously, but now it's reopened fully, I guess two lanes of traffic. But Eastern and Western Canada were cut off because one bridge collapsed. Apparently because of cold weather. Come on. Cold weather, Canada, Northern Ontario, where it gets to -40 all the time. Like, that should not happen. That's why putting money into infrastructure, running a big deficit to get infrastructure improvements done, whether it's urban transit, rural infrastructure, water main construction. You know, we see what's happening in Flint, Michigan. We see what they're going on in Flint, Michigan, and that's due to partly political corruption and stupidity, but also due to lack of money spent on infrastructure. And this is apparently in the U.S. There's bad water from Pittsburgh to Stockton, California, and it's due to the fact they haven't updated infrastructure because the United States is spending trillions of dollars going around the world killing people. You know what I mean? Whether it's the invasion of Iraq, whether it's their involvement in Somalia, whether it's, you know, the United States spends way too much on the military, way too much on intervention, and that's why they have problems like Flint, Michigan, and Stockton, California, and bad water and all sorts of problems in that country. We don't want to go there. When deficit spending is good, we shouldn't be spending it on the military or spending the $300 million in this war in Iraq and Syria, which I'll get to in a second. Deficit spending is good. We need to spend it on infrastructure. We need to spend it in urban transit, like so we don't have all the signal problems on the Toronto subway system. We need to spend it on urban transit from Victoria to St. John's. We need to spend it in small cities. We need to get our water mains so they don't break in cold weather, because let's face it, we know how the winter's been all across Canada. One day it's +10, next day it's -20. Takes a toll on the water mains. We need to spend money on that sort of thing. Aboriginal communities need clean water. They still don't have it. We need to spend money on that. So yes, going into a deficit to do this is the right thing to do, and it's beneficial to the Canadian economy. And as Paul Krugman, New York Times columnist, won the Nobel Prize for his thinking on economics, says, yes, you invest in, and as John Maynard Keynes, Keynesian economics, you invest money when your economy is struggling, you go into debt, and you benefit from that. Austerity is good when things are really great, but when things are struggling, when the economy is struggling, you go into debt and you invest money. It's got to be smart money. It's got to benefit everybody, but it's a good thing to do. So I rambled on about that, but we talked about Iraq and Syria. I think it's great that Trudeau ended the bombing mission, but he should have ended the military mission totally. And, you know, Russian and Western intervention in this area of the world is not a good thing. Yes, the whole region is being remade. The Syrian civil war, there are thousands of groups in Syria fighting each other. We should not be involved. It's not our, the borders of the First World War have fallen. The ones the French and the British, Sykes-Picot, the ones the French and the British set up are collapsing. Everybody knows that. You know, at some point we need to disengage. Richard Haass, who is a senior fellow in the State Department under George Bush, bright guy, very bright guy, and now the head of the Council on Foreign Relations, said the pathologies of the region are beyond the United States to control or to deal with. I've got that quote a bit off, but he basically was saying we need to disengage. At some point, the people of the region need to solve their own problems without Western intervention. And we need to withdraw, let them solve their problems. Things that the United States, Canada, Western Europe, the Russians could do: humanitarian aid, refugee resettlement, robust diplomacy. But yeah, Western military and Russian military intervention are just killing thousands of people. Thousands of innocents are dying, whether that's in northern Syria, whether that's in the going farther astray to Yemen, where the United States is backing the Saudis fighting the Houthis in Yemen, and people are dying. And lots of thousands of civilians are dying. And then there's, of course, in Afghanistan, where it's a joke. I mean, all the blood and treasure Canada put into that, and other countries, the Dutch, the Danish, of course, the Americans. Well, in Afghanistan's a joke. And a lot of civilians are dying, too. There was a hospital strike a number of months ago in Kunduz. The Americans did a drone strike, killed lots of people. And this happens in Yemen. This is happening in Syria. We need to withdraw from, Libya is the poster child for Western intervention. Now it's a recruiting poster for ISIS. And Canada took the lead role in that. Remember Harper had the big thing on Parliament Hill? Canada took the lead role in Libya. And that's a recruiting post. It's a disgrace. Libya is destroyed. Should have kept Gaddafi in power. He was a thug, but whatever. Things were better when he was in power. Should have kept Saddam Hussein in power, a nasty thug. The Americans' intervention there created ISIS. Everybody knows it. Libya is now a recruiting poster for ISIS and destabilizing not only North Africa, its neighbors, Tunisia, Egypt, but of course going south to Mali, to Burkina Faso. I mean, it's just, and we were responsible, Canada and Stephen Harper were responsible for that. Withdraw our military forces from the region, let the people of the region decide their own fate. And it's in Syria, there are thousands of groups fighting each other. So what are we doing there in that quagmire? And we support Egypt. Egypt is a boiling cauldron. It could be the next Syria. I mean, and we support this fascist government in Egypt that overthrew the Morsi government. Not perfect. Muslim Brotherhood, not perfect. They had their own problems, but boy, we supported these fascists who overthrew them. I mean, I can go on and on and on about that. Let's just we alluded to American politics. What a disgrace, right? I mean, I have to admit, I watched those Democratic debates. I think Bernie Sanders is a fraud. First of all, he's not a true Democrat because he says he's an independent, and I don't like. I agree with Brian Mulroney, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. He said, "You dance with the people that brung you." So you stick to the party. Hillary Clinton has been pretty much a lifelong Democrat. So she has a right to run for the Democrats. Her warts and her problems and all that stuff, she has a right to run for the Democrats. Bernie Sanders is an independent. All of a sudden he decides he wants to run for the Democrats and run for the presidency. I don't get it. Like, you dance with the people that brung you. I've been involved with the NDP off and on for a good chunk of my life. And I give them a lot of blood and treasure. But I've been very critical of them over the last 7-8 years. I wouldn't go and run for the NDP, given my criticisms of them, because they would say, no, screw you. Despite all the work you did for them over the years, you're very critical of us. You don't like us. And why should you run for us? You don't really believe in us. And when I did that bit of work for Linda McQuaig last summer and fall, that's because I believed in the person. I believed in Linda. And she should have been elected, should have been a great member of parliament. But I was never, and I said to Linda, I'm not a big fan of the NDP anymore, but I'll still do some work for you because you're a friend and you asked me. But I would never run for any sort of position in the NDP, given my criticisms of them over the last number of years. So I don't get it why Bernie Sanders all of a sudden went from an independent to a Democrat and now thinks he can run for the Democratic nomination to be president. I mean, I don't know why no one's challenged him on this. Some people have actually, but he's not a true Democrat. He's an independent. And all of a sudden he thinks he can run for the Democratic nomination to be president. So I don't know. I think he's a fraud. Definitely brings up good ideas about inequality and all that. But don't get me wrong. And I know he's moved Hillary to the left, which is good. It's almost like somebody put him up. The whole thing's kind of strange how he came out of nowhere. But Hillary is right when she defends Obama's record. I can't really, on domestic policy, Foreign policy, forget it. I mean, I think Obama has been really disgusting. I mean, drone attacks have killed thousands of civilians. In many ways, Obama's a war criminal. I mean, how can you not say that? I mean, the drone attacks initiated under his government have killed thousands of civilians in Central Asia, in the Arabian Peninsula, in North Africa, or Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the AFPAC border, Afghanistan, Pakistan. So yeah, I mean, it's funny because when they were going on about Henry Kissinger the other day in that one debate, and yeah, Henry Kissinger's a war criminal. I get it. I mean, he's definitely a bona fide war criminal. Like but when Hillary said, well, I take his advice, I agree. I like to see Henry on these talk shows because he has very good advice about China and Russia, rational advice about how to, he believes in not isolating Russia or China. It's very good advice. I agree with Hillary. So when Bernie said, well, how can you deal with Henry Kissinger? I thought, I agree with you, Bernie, and I agree with you, Hillary. Yes, Henry's a war criminal. He definitely would have been tried at Nuremberg for war crimes. But he is a smart guy. And so I'm going back. So yeah, everybody, you don't get to leadership you don't get to that top job in the United States without being a war criminal. Even Jimmy Carter's got blood on his hands, and most people don't see him that way. So, I mean, like I said, all these problems go back to his administration when he put a lot of money into the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets when they invaded Afghanistan in '79, and the Reagan administration continued that, and we addressed this in previous videos. But the Mujahideen became the Taliban and Al Qaeda, and Reagan called them their equivalent to the founding fathers. But 15 years later, flying planes into the World Trade Center. So, and of course now this is morphed into ISIS. So the Mujahideen morphed into the Taliban, and then into Al Qaeda, and now ISIS. So this is all due to American policy. So that's why I always say too, why is Canada and a good chunk of the world mopping up for the mistakes of American policy? Anyways, I've rambled on, but I want to end this on the American election. Hillary won big tonight in South Carolina. That's good. I do think she wouldn't be a bad president. I like people who read, and I like people who study. And I've watched her at those Benghazi hearings, and she's smart. And I like smart people. And I think she's good on social policy. She might be a hawk on foreign policy, which is not good. But on domestic policy, she's good. And she'll defend a woman's right to choose. She'll defend gay people. She's good. And she'd be a good president. And I know the Clintons are kind of sleazy and all that. We get that. But I think she'd be a very good president. Going back to the Donald Trump phenomenon, what's amazing about Donald Trump? On some things, he's actually pretty good. Even last night, I was watching the debate the other night. It was going on, and they're all nutty about Israel, right? Israel's got to be defended at all costs. Israel is like Santa Claus. And Trump said, well, I'm neutral on that. He basically said the Palestinians deserve something. And Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and all the other whack jobs that are running for that nomination. And they are whack jobs. Donald Trump is, I have to admit, he's actually sane compared to Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. Marco Rubio, I think, is a creepy, think of him in a creepy Hollywood movie as the president. That guy is totally creepy. He sends a chill up your spine. He's so creepy. Donald Trump is a clown. He's a buffoon. Okay, he is what he is, and he's been picked apart as much as Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton have been picked apart by the media. I don't think there's a lot of stuff there, but Marco Rubio, what a creep. And whereas Ted Cruz is, well, he's not even worth talking about. But when Donald Trump actually says, the United States should not have invaded Iraq in 2003, Donald Trump says ISIS is a creation of a good reason. One of the reasons ISIS exists is because of that invasion in 2003. Donald Trump says that. Who else says that? It's good. He believes, he said, I want to be neutral on the Israeli-Palestinian. I'm not going to go, he says, I'm very pro-Israel. But he, basically says, the Palestinians deserve a deal. And nobody on the Republican side says that. Marco Rubio says that any Palestinians are all terrorists. That's what Marco Rubio says. He has no. I mean, this guy is so dumb. I mean, it's incredible how dumb he is, sleazy and dirty. And I got to tell you, I can see, a bit of light in Donald Trump. Yeah, he's a buffoon and he is a racist, no question. But I think some of this racism, some of the stuff about Mexico and Muslims is just done for political effect. I don't think he really believes it. I don't think Donald Trump believes in anything. But don't get me wrong, what he says about Muslims and he says about Mexicans is horrible. It's disgusting. But then he says things that are rational, right? That the U.S. should not intervene in the Middle East. The war against Iraq was horrible. It created ISIS. The Palestinians do deserve a fair deal. So he says rational things amidst all his nuttiness and bigotry. But I got to tell you, the Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz are nuts. They're absolutely nuts. And Ben Carson is a neurosurgeon. Would you want Ben Carson operating on your brain? This guy looks like, I don't know where he came from. He was the first one to advocate he said a Muslim should never be a president of the United States. I mean, like, Ben Carson is nuts, but at least he keeps quiet and he's sort of irrelevant. But where did he come from? And I certainly wouldn't want Ben Carson operating on my brain. I mean, if anyone needs operation on his brain, the neurosurgeon Ben Carson is Ben Carson. Like, oh God. And John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, he loves himself too much. I've seen him in too many interviews. He's so in love with himself. He thinks he's God's gift to the world. And don't get me wrong, he seems the most rational of all of them, but he's so in love with himself. And, he's off-putting. I got to tell you, I can see why, people support Donald Trump for all the wrong reasons. America's great again, build walls and all that crap. But he says in all the bombast and all the stupidity and all the bigotry, he actually says some rational things. So, and I think I'd rather have him as, I got to tell you, you're going to be shocked at this, but I'd rather have him as president than Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz. Those two are creepoids. Marco Rubio is so creepy and so dirty and so nasty and so stupid. And he reminds me of the worst Hollywood movie where the president is a sleazy, dirty, and that's Marco Rubio. Ted Cruz is irrelevant. Like, he's just such a clown. It's not even worth talking about Ted Cruz. And the rest they're all going to drop out. But I have to admit, I like watching these Republican debates. They're a gong show. They're funny. There's no substance. There's very little substance, but it's a good tonic from, actually, I turned off from Canadian news because at some point I don't want to hear about Justin Trudeau anymore. I don't want to hear about the pipeline debate. I don't want to hear about all this. Well, Canada's in pretty good shape, but I just don't want to hear about some of the parochial policies of Canada. So I turn on to the Gong Show on CNN, which is it's Gong Show all day, all the time. And then, of course, I realize I live in a pretty blessed place. Here I am speaking to you, and the U.S. border is only 40 miles away as the crow flies. I'm thinking, that wall? Maybe it's a good thing. Donald Trump says he won't build it from St. John's to Victoria. Too expensive, too costly, and he doesn't hate Canadians. But I'm thinking, let's keep some of these. I don't want to offend Americans, but I don't know sometimes. When I look at the U.S. election, I'm thinking maybe Canada should build that wall. And I think a lot of Canadians would agree with me. And it's a nutty thing. Hillary won tonight in South Carolina. I think she would be a pretty good president, despite the sleaziness and the warts and all the Wall Street money she gets. Lesser of evils, right? So, okay, I think I've said 5 minutes to Cleve. Now we've gone on to 20, and Bernie Sanders, I think, is a bit of a fraud, although his ideas, some of them are pretty good. And I do believe we know the experience from Obama that you can only get so much done in the American political system. So Bernie Sanders, you can't promise a New Jerusalem. It's not going to happen. And you're not going to get a Canadian health care system in the United States. Look at how Obama struggled to get that, what Obamacare got done. Look what Hillary did in 1994. And you're not going to get serious gun control in the U.S. How many, in the last 2 days, have been shootings in Kansas, and there's another one. I don't even remember. There's gun violence in the U.S. that's incredible. So the bottom line is, don't promise the New Jerusalem. It's not going to happen. And ask Bob Rae when he was elected premier here in September of 1990 in Ontario. You're not going to get. It's not going to happen. The forces in the U.S., the right-wing forces, congressional forces, the American public is still very conservative. You're not going to get everything you want. And you can get minor changes. If Hillary can approve Obamacare, you get better gun control. You get better wages for people. These are victories. And on foreign policy, if you continue Obama, which is smart, right? Opening up the world, opening up relations with Iran. Going to Cuba, good thing to do. Obama's done some good things in foreign policy. The Cuba thing was great. Iran, opening up relations with Iran, a smart move. Iran could help in stabilizing the region. The Syrian conflict, I don't know, 7 years war, 100-year war, could go on for a long time. We should never have supported all these rebel groups. Assad is a thug and a murderer, but we should have, we could have probably done, like Saddam Hussein, like Gaddafi. Gaddafi had already been moving in many directions. Gaddafi did not deserve to be overthrown. Assad and Saddam Hussein could have probably moved in some democratic direction in some ways. But boy, I think, I agree with the Russians in some ways. So supporting Assad was the best of bad options. And of course, that's the way that ship sailed a long time ago. Syria is a mess. And there are no good options there, only bad options. Syria is not going to be the country that it was. Iraq won't be the country that it was. Things are changing. The borders are being remade. Let's just not make things worse with the military intervention. And we got to encourage Putin to stop bombing people too. So political solution is the only answer. Robust diplomacy. Tough. But anyways, I don't have all the answers. And I think but Assad is part of the answer, and we should have supported him despite the fact that he was a thug. We should have just, sometimes you got to keep these assholes, can't use that word on YouTube, but got to keep these guys, and sometimes you got to see what you got and don't support all these weird rebel groups because you never know what you're getting. We saw that in Libya, and now, of course, we know this in Syria, and there are thousands of them. They all hate each other. These are, as Richard Haas said, these are pathologies that go back way before, these are way before even, forget about the Americans, before the British and the French and the Ottomans. And so, we got to let people in the region solve their own problems. That includes Afghanistan. The Taliban are going to rule again in Afghanistan. Is that what the Afghan people want? Well, so be it. God, how many Canadian kids died there? At some point, let it go. We got to remove the West needs to just at least militarily disengage from these regions and concentrate on diplomacy and let the people of the region decide. So I don't know. I rambled on, and I didn't mean to, but it's there's so much to talk about, right? It's easy. Deficits are easy. Ontario, Canadian deficits. When you can talk about Syria and the disintegration of the Middle East and what's happening in North Africa, you think, oh God, what's an $18 billion deficit when these countries are just, and of course the refugee crisis in Europe. I mean, we need to concentrate. Canada could probably take in 100,000 Syrian refugees easily. The Americans don't even want to take in any. So got to credit the Germans, though. They're doing their bit. And I feel bad for Greece because they're in economic straits, and all these refugees are coming to their shores. So anyways, Clay, we got to shut this down because I've rambled and I feel bad for people. But
No, that was a good one.
yeah, so we'll just shut it down. But to round it up, if we're going to go into debt to help Syrian refugees in Canada, good. If we're going to go into debt to prepare infrastructure and bring clean water to Aboriginal communities, good. And yeah, and remember, Flint, Michigan, and the Americans spending trillions of dollars in intervention in military, and their Flint, Michigans all over the United States. It's time to get priorities straight. And that's the way we will end this.
Okay.